crystal clinked against crystal as my brother raised his wine glass. Everyone was laughing except me. "Here's to another year of government paychecks," Brent said, grinning at the dinner table. His lawyer's smile never quite reached his eyes. My father chuckled and leaned back in his chair. "You'll be broke by 40, Clayton. Good thing you never needed to provide for anyone." "I'm Clayton Ward, 44 years old, just retired from 22 years as an Army logistics officer." I nodded and kept cutting my steak. The dining room walls told the real story. Photo after photo of family achievements. Brent in his law school graduation robes, Dad shaking hands with local politicians, Mom, before the cancer took her, all of them in suits and ties. Not one uniform in sight. The family business calendar hung by the kitchen door. Meetings, court dates, campaign events. 20 years of my deployments, and my name appeared exactly 0 times. Maybe I should have seen it coming. Brent set down his glass and pulled out a manila folder. "Speaking of finances, we need to handle some paperwork tonight. Trust restructuring for tax purposes." Dad nodded like this was routine. "Standard stuff. Just need your signature, son." They slid 3 documents across the mahogany table. The same table where we used to do homework as kids, where Mom served Sunday dinners before the treatment started. "Should I read through these first?" I asked. "It's just legal language," Brent said. His pen clicked once. "Honestly, you'd need a law degree to understand half of it." The pages felt heavy in my hands, dense paragraphs about asset redistribution and beneficiary modifications. My eyes caught phrases like extended absence and incapacitated by military service. What was the real reason they wanted this signed tonight? "There's a lot here," I said quietly. Dad's fork scraped against his plate. "Clayton, we've been managing family finances while you've been overseas. This just makes everything official." I memorized their faces in that moment. The way Brent's jaw tightened when I didn't immediately sign. How Dad's fingers drummed against the table. The slight pause before they spoke. 22 years of reading people's intentions had taught me something. When someone rushes you through paperwork, there's usually a reason. "Can I get copies to review?" Brent's laugh came out too quick. "Of course. I'll have my assistant prepare summaries for you tomorrow." Summaries, not copies. I signed the papers anyway. My handwriting looked smaller than usual against the white space. Each signature felt like stepping deeper into something I couldn't see clearly. The conversation moved on to Brent's political campaign and Dad's business connections. They talked around me, not to me, like I was furniture that occasionally needed attention. After dessert, I helped clear the table. The kitchen felt smaller than I remembered. Everything in this house seemed smaller now. "Your brother's doing big things," Dad said, loading the dishwasher. "Important work in the community." I dried a wine glass and set it in the cabinet. "What kind of community work?" "Development projects. Bringing progress to areas that need it." Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger, just clarity. I'd spent 2 decades learning that the most dangerous operations happened in silence. The enemy never announced their intentions with trumpets and flags. They smiled, shared meals, and asked you to sign papers you couldn't read. My family had just treated me like hostile territory. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom, looking at those family photos on the nightstand. All of us together at Christmas, birthdays, graduations. Before I learned that blood meant less than I thought. The documents were already filed somewhere in Brent's office. Whatever I'd signed was done. But something else had shifted too. I'd been planning logistics missions since I was 22 years old. I knew how to move resources, gather intelligence, and execute operations without anyone seeing them coming. For the first time in years, I had a new mission. The Veterans Resource Center opened at 7 a.m. I was always the first one there. The building sat on Maple Street like an afterthought. Faded brick, cracked sidewalk, a hand-painted sign that needed touch-ups. Most people drove past without noticing it existed. Inside, folding tables held stacks of job applications and resume templates. The coffee was terrible, but nobody complained. We had work to do. Clayton, can you look at this? Marcus Thompson, 26, 3 tours in Afghanistan, held up a resume draft. His hand shook slightly, not from nerves, from the IED blast that ended his deployment early. I reviewed his application for a warehouse supervisor position. You manage supply chains for a forward operating base, I told him. That's logistics under pressure. Civilian companies would kill for that experience. Marcus grinned. You always know what to say. The truth was simpler. These guys had skills that corporate America didn't know how to recognize. My job was translation, turning military experience into language HR departments understood. By 9 a.m., the center buzzed with quiet activity, resume reviews, interview prep, phone calls to employers who'd give veterans a fair shot. Nothing fancy, but it worked. The mail arrived at 10:15. Among the donation requests and utility bills, I found a thick envelope with my father's law firm letterhead. My name was typed across the front in formal script. Here's the thing about bad news. It always comes in official envelope. He opened it in the back office. The letter was brief, professional, and devastating. Dear Ward, this confirms the restructuring of the Ward Family Trust has been completed. As of date per the amended terms, your beneficiary status has been terminated. Please contact our office with any questions. The signature belonged to someone I'd never met. 22 years of service, 6 deployments. I'd missed birthdays, holidays, and Mom's final weeks because I was overseas, and this was my reward, a form letter. But you know what hurt more than losing the money? They never saw me as family to begin with. Rough morning? Miguel Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of decent coffee from the diner down the street. Miguel had been my squad leader in Iraq. Now he taught 9th grade and ran an after-school program for at-risk kids. Half his students were military brats, dealing with deployed parents or PTSD households. Family business, I said, folding the letter. Miguel handed me the coffee and sat down. Speaking of business, we need to talk. The city council's been sniffing around the property. What kind of sniffing? The expensive kind. Word is they want to buy out the center and the lot next door. Luxury condos probably. Prime real estate. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. When? Soon. Maybe 6 months if we're lucky. I looked around the cramped office. The walls held photos of success stories. Veterans who'd found careers, kids who'd graduated high school, families rebuilding after deployments. This place was a lifeline for people the rest of the world forgot. Who's pushing the development? Miguel's expression darkened. That's where it gets interesting. The proposal came through Hartwell and Associates. My blood went cold. Hartwell and Associates was Brent's law firm. You sure about that? Saw the paperwork myself. Your brother's name was all over the preliminary filings. The room felt smaller suddenly. I set down my coffee and pulled out my phone, scrolling through recent news articles about local development projects. It didn't take long to connect the dots. Brent's political campaign had been talking about community revitalization and bringing prosperity to underserved areas. The Veterans Center sat on prime downtown real estate that could be flipped for serious money. Why would they restructure the family trust right before a major property deal? Because they needed capital, and they needed me out of the picture. My absence hadn't just been an excuse to cut me out. It had been cover for this entire scheme. While I was overseas, they'd been positioning themselves to destroy the one place that actually served veterans. Miguel, how much time do we have? Hard to say. These things move fast once the money gets involved. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, a group of teenagers were helping an elderly veteran load groceries into his car. Simple kindness. That happened here every day. How many people would lose their support system so my family could make a profit? What if we could buy more time? Miguel raised an eyebrow. How? My military pension. It's not huge, but it's steady income. Banks like steady income. Clayton, you can't risk your retirement. It's not a risk if we're smart about it. Use it as collateral. Get a loan to cover the sinner's expenses while we figure out a long-term solution." Miguel was quiet for a long moment. "You'd do that?" I thought about the letter in my pocket, about family dinners where I was treated like a stranger, about 22 years of service that meant nothing to the people who shared my name. These people are my family now. By afternoon, I was at the bank, talking to a loan officer about using my pension as collateral. The paperwork would take a few days, but it was doable. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a legal pad, sketching out everything I knew about the property deal: dates, amounts, connections between Brent's firm and the development proposal. Military intelligence had taught me that information was power, but you had to know how to use it. I'd spent 2 decades running logistics operations in hostile territory. This was just a different kind of battlefield. My family thought they were playing chess. They had no idea I'd been playing war games my entire adult life. The next morning, I'd start gathering evidence. Real evidence, not speculation. Property records, city council minutes, financial documents that showed exactly how this deal was structured. Brent had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed I'd stay quiet and disappear. That was his first miscalculation. The first rule of military operations: know your assets. I called a meeting for Thursday evening, not a formal gathering, just coffee and conversation in the center's main room. 23 veterans showed up, plus a dozen teenagers from Miguel's after-school program. "Here's the situation," I began, standing near the coffee pot. "The city wants to buy this building, turn it into condos. We have maybe 4 months before they force a sale." Marcus Thompson raised his hand. "What can we do about it?" "Tell your stories," I said, "but tell them right." I'd brought a stack of composition notebooks and a borrowed video camera, simple tools for a simple mission. "Every successful operation starts with intelligence gathering," I explained. "We need documented proof of what this place means to the community." Sarah Williams, 17, daughter of a deployed Marine, opened her notebook. "Like what?" "How many jobs did you find through the center? How many kids stayed in school because of the tutoring program? How many families avoided eviction because someone here helped with emergency assistance?" You could see the understanding dawn on their faces. Miguel stepped forward. "Clayton's right. Numbers matter, but stories matter more. People vote with their hearts." We spent 2 hours organizing teams. Veterans would document job placements and family assistance. Students would record testimonials about the mentorship program. Teachers would track graduation rates and college enrollment. "This isn't about begging," I told them. "This is about showing the city council what they'd be destroying." By the following week, we had 47 documented stories and 12 hours of video interviews, but documentation was just phase 1. Logistics is about moving resources efficiently, I explained to Miguel over lunch. Right now, our biggest resource is goodwill. We need to mobilize it. The service day idea came together like a military exercise. 1 weekend, maximum impact, impossible to ignore. I made calls to every veteran organization within 50 miles. Miguel reached out to parent groups, church committees, and local businesses. We needed bodies, tools, and supplies. "What's the objective?" asked Tommy Rodriguez, Miguel's nephew, a sophomore with steady hands and a good attitude. "Make this place impossible to tear down," I said. Saturday morning at 6 a.m., the parking lot filled with pickup trucks and volunteers. 3 local news crews showed up. Miguel had connections from his teaching days. By noon, we had 200 people scraping paint, planting flowers, and repairing damaged siding. The teenagers worked alongside combat veterans. Families brought lunch for everyone. Channel 7 interviewed a grandmother whose son had found work through the center's job program. "This place saved my boy's life," she said, tears streaming down her face. The footage aired that evening during prime time. Sunday's newspaper ran a front-page photo of veterans and students working side by side, painting over graffiti that had covered the building's east wall for years. Momentum was building, but momentum without direction was just chaos. "We need political pressure," Miguel said Monday morning. "The city council meets Thursday." I'd already prepared the petition. 3 pages of demands: halt the forced sale, conduct community impact studies, explore alternative funding for center operations. But signatures on paper weren't enough. We needed faces. Thursday evening, the city council chambers overflowed. Veterans in dress uniforms lined the walls. Families held hand-painted signs reading, "Save our center," and "Veterans deserve better." Miguel had arranged for local TV coverage. Camera crews filmed as speaker after speaker approached the podium. Marcus Thompson's voice shook as he described finding purpose again after his injury. "This center didn't just help me find a job. It helped me find myself." Sarah Williams talked about the mentorship program keeping her grades up while her father deployed to Syria. "When the nightmare started, this place gave me somewhere safe to go." The council looked uncomfortable. This wasn't the routine vote they'd expected. Then Brent walked in. He wore his campaign suit, navy blue, perfectly pressed. His confident smile faltered when he saw the packed room and news cameras. Council Chairman Peterson called for public comment on the development proposal. That's when things got interesting. "Mr. Ward," Peterson said, reading from his notes, "you're listed as the primary legal counsel for this project. Would you like to address the community concerns?" Brent approached the podium, and I watched his face change as he realized what was happening. His casual vote had become a public relations nightmare. "The development will bring economic growth to an underutilized area," he began. Someone in the crowd shouted, "What about the people who use that building?" Brent's practiced politician voice wavered. "All residents will be fairly compensated for any inconvenience." "Compensated how?" called another voice. The cameras captured everything. Brent fumbling for answers, the crowd's growing anger, the council members looking like they wanted to disappear. Tommy Rodriguez stood up in the back. 17 years old, steady as a rock. He walked to the microphone. "My name is Tommy Rodriguez. This center taught me job skills when my mom couldn't afford trade school. It gave me a place to study when our apartment was too loud. It connected me with mentors who believed in me when nobody else did." His voice carried across the silent room. "You want to tear that down for condos? Go ahead. But know that you're destroying the only place in this city that actually helps people who need it." The video of Tommy's speech hit social media within an hour. By midnight, it had been shared 8,000 times. Brent left through the back exit, avoiding the cameras. That night, I sat in my apartment reviewing the public records I'd been collecting: property transfer documents, financial disclosures, campaign contribution reports. The pattern was crystal clear now. The proceeds from the center sale weren't just going to generic development. They were earmarked for a specific purpose: major donations to Brent's political campaign, funneled through shell companies to hide the source. The trust restructuring wasn't about excluding me. It was about creating a clean financial pipeline for what was essentially money laundering. My family hadn't just betrayed me. They'd corrupted the entire process to fund Brent's political ambitions. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Detective Lisa Chang. We'd worked together on a veteran fraud case 2 years ago. She'd moved to investigative journalism after retirement. "Lisa? It's Clayton Ward. I have a story for you." I didn't mention my name in the evidence packet. Didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves. The headline hit the local paper at 6 a.m. Tuesday morning. "Veterans Center targeted by political insider." Lisa Chang's byline appeared under a photo of Brent at the city council meeting, looking like a deer caught in headlights. The article was surgical. Clean facts, documented evidence, no editorial commentary needed. By 8 a.m., Channel 7 was running the story as their lead segment. By noon, regional news networks had picked it up. My phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. "Holy shit, check Channel 12. The story was spreading like wildfire through veteran networks online. American Legion posts, VFW chapters, military family Facebook groups, all sharing the same outrage. How could a lawyer use his own brother's service record as cover for corruption? The political damage was immediate and devastating. Brent's campaign headquarters went dark by Wednesday afternoon. His major donors, local business leaders who'd bankrolled his run for city council, started distancing themselves faster than you could imagine. Robert Hutchins, who owned 3 car dealerships and had contributed $15,000 to Brent's campaign, released a statement. "We cannot support candidates who exploit veterans for personal gain." Thursday morning brought the death blow. The state attorney general's office announced an independent audit of all recent property transfers involving Hartwell and Associates. Brent's law firm suspended him pending the investigation. His political career was over before it really began. Friday's city board meeting felt like a different world from the chaos 3 weeks earlier. No packed chambers, no angry crowds, just routine business conducted by people who'd learned an important lesson about community oversight. I stood at the back of the room in my old Army field jacket, watching democracy work the way it was supposed to. Council Chairman Peterson read from prepared remarks. In light of recent events, the city is withdrawing from all negotiations regarding the Veterans Center property. Additionally, we're establishing a new community oversight board to ensure veteran services remain protected. The new board would be run by people who actually understood what the center meant. Miguel was appointed as chairman. Marcus Thompson and Sarah Williams were selected as veteran and youth representatives. No lawyers, no political ambitions, just people who cared about serving others. The meeting lasted 20 minutes. Nobody mentioned my name, which was exactly how I wanted it. But recognition came anyway. The following Tuesday, Mayor Davidson presented Miguel and me with a city proclamation for distinguished service to the veteran community. Local foundations pledged $40,000 in new funding for center operations and youth programs. Sarah Williams gave a speech about how the mentorship program had helped her get early admission to State University. "This place doesn't just help people," she said. "It builds futures." Standing on the City Hall steps, surrounded by people whose lives had been changed by something we'd fought to save, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, longed somewhere. 3 weeks later, Dad called and invited me to dinner. His voice sounded different, smaller somehow. The dining room felt the same, but the energy had completely shifted. No laughter this time, no jokes about government paychecks or broken careers. Dad served pot roast and mashed potatoes, Mom's recipe. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. "Brent won't be joining us," Dad said quietly. I nodded and kept eating. "The business is struggling," he continued. "Lost several major clients after the news coverage. Reputation matters in this town." Why was he telling me this? "Clayton, I want you to know that your mother was proud of your service. She always said you were the one with real character." I set down my fork. "She never told me that. Didn't want it to go to your head." Dad's laugh came out hollow. "Turns out she was right about a lot of things." The conversation died there. We finished dinner in silence. 2 men who'd run out of things to say to each other decades ago. Driving home, I realized something had fundamentally changed, not just in my family, in me. For years, I'd been trying to earn their respect by serving my country with honor. I'd measured my worth by their approval, their acceptance, their willingness to see me as an equal. But the community I'd helped save had shown me something different. Respect wasn't something you earned from people who shared your DNA. It was something you built through actions that mattered. Miguel's students were graduating high school and finding careers. Veterans were rebuilding their lives with dignity. Families were staying together because someone cared enough to help. That was a legacy worth fighting for. Brent had destroyed himself, chasing money and political power. His greed, wrapped in family pragmatism, had cost him everything he thought he wanted. The trust he'd restructured to cut me out, it was worthless now, tied up in legal proceedings and tainted by scandal. The property deal that was supposed to make him rich, dead in the water, along with his reputation. The family name he'd tried to leverage for political gain, now it was associated with corruption and betrayal of veterans. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people destroy themselves. I pulled into the Veterans Center parking lot and sat in my truck for a moment. Through the windows, I could see the evening GED class in session. Miguel was helping a former Marine work through algebra problems. These people had become my real family, not because of blood or legal documents, but because we'd chosen to stand together when it mattered. Tomorrow I'd be back here, helping someone else rebuild their life. That was enough. Dawn came quiet over Maple Street. The Veterans Center sat empty after another busy evening. GED classes had run until 9, followed by job interview prep and family counseling sessions. The coffee pot was clean, chairs stacked, floors swept. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the silence. In my hands, I carried a framed collage that had taken me 3 weeks to assemble. 47 photos of people whose lives had been touched by this place. Veterans, teenagers, teachers, families, all of them smiling, thriving, together. Marcus Thompson in his warehouse supervisor uniform, Sarah Williams at her high school graduation. Miguel with his student mentorship award, Tommy Rodriguez accepting his trade school scholarship. Real people, real futures, real hope. I mounted the frame on the main wall, right where everyone would see it when they walked in. No plaque, no ceremony, just a quiet reminder of what we'd built together. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out a manila envelope, the same one that had arrived months ago announcing my removal from the family trust, the letter that had started everything. I'd kept every document, not out of bitterness or the need for evidence. The investigation was over, Brent's schemes exposed. I kept them as a record of what we'd overcome. The center's archives sat in a converted closet near the back office. Old newsletters, volunteer records, thank you letters from families who'd found help when they needed it most, stories of second chances and new beginnings. I placed the trust documents in a cardboard box, sealed it with tape, and wrote the date on the outside. Someday, maybe someone would need to understand how close this place had come to disappearing. But not today. Today, the center would open at 7, and Marcus would help 3 new veterans with resume reviews. Miguel's students would arrive after school for tutoring and mentorship. The coffee would be terrible, and nobody would complain. I checked my watch, 6:45 a.m. From my wallet, I pulled out my military ID. 22 years of service compressed into a plastic card with my photo and rank. For so long, it had defined who I was. Now it was just part of the story. I slipped it back into my wallet next to my center volunteer badge. Both belonged there, different chapters of the same mission. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Miguel appeared, carrying his usual terrible coffee and a stack of homework to grade. "You're here early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." He nodded toward the new frame on the wall. "Nice touch." We stood there for a moment, looking at all those faces. People who'd found their way because someone cared enough to help. "You know what I learned?" Miguel asked. "What's that?" "Family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up when things get hard." He was right, of course. Blood meant less than I'd thought for most of my life. Loyalty, service, sacrifice. Those were the bonds that mattered. I'd spent years trying to earn my father's respect and my brother's acceptance, but respect couldn't be earned from people who'd already decided you didn't matter. It had to be built with people who chose to see your worth. "Coffee's getting cold," McGillis said, heading toward his office. I took one last look around the main room. In an hour it would buzz with quiet activity. Veterans helping veterans, students finding mentors, families rebuilding their lives one conversation at a time. This was my mission now. Not the one I'd been born into, but the one I'd chosen. I stepped outside into the morning air. The sun was climbing over the downtown buildings, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Another day was beginning. Behind me, the Veterans Center stood solid and permanent, a place where people mattered more than profit, where service meant something real. I'd found my purpose. The community was stronger for our silence and resolve. Mission accomplished.